set? I'd like to call to order the November 22nd, 2011 meeting of the Newport Beach City Council. May we have roll call, please?
The record will reflect that Councilmember Rosansky is absent.
Thank you. Let's move to clarification items. Councilmember Daigle?
None.
And Councilmember Curry? None. And Councilmember Selich?
I have none.
Councilmember Hill?
I would just like to note on item number 5, the M2 programming. Program number 2 deals with Newport Boulevard along the Lido Village area. And since we are under study of that area as one of our revitalization areas, I think it's critical that as that plan be developed, that it be done in concert with the work effort that's going on with that revitalization. I think that's a significant opportunity for us to move forward with the project, and so I would just ask staff to make sure that that coordination took place.
Mayor Pro Tem Gardner.
And also on number 5, on the widening, any opportunities for improvements for bike safety to be kept in mind.
All right, I had one item. I had meant to send a little note earlier. With regard to item number 10, there were 4 bids, I guess, that were received, and there was no mention of what the spread of cost was on those bids. Do we happen to know? This is for the ECM system.
Rob or Tracy, familiar?
Yeah, I believe
Pricing.
that there were 4 bids that were received. I know there
Better
was
come up
also
to the podium either way. If you can.
I can get you the specifics of the information, but the range was between about 420,000 and 190,000 is the one that we picked, so it was the low bid.
So we did select the low bid then?
Yes,
Okay.
understanding that our first round of the RFP, we got a general plan from them.
Correct.
And then, so the general costing, before we got into details, it was the low bid.
I see. All right, so this was kind of a combination RFQ, RFP arrangement where you wanted to make sure you had the right system
Scope of
answer
detail.
before
Yes.
you went to.
Yes.
Okay, that satisfies me. Let's move on to other items of business here, the review of the zoning code.
So, Mr. Mayor and council members, this is a request that your council made of us a short time ago involving having us take a new look at, with you, the way items are called up, either from the zoning administrator to the planning commission or to the city council from the planning commission. So with that, Brenda Wisniewski is here, our Deputy Community Development Director, and Brenda will make the presentation.
Good afternoon, Mayor Hand, fellow council members. Brenda Wisniewski, Community Development Director, Deputy. In your staff report, there's some details about the current appeal process as well as the fees, and I put together a few slides for you this afternoon. Also want to include in my presentation some discussion of what other jurisdictions have as part of their appeal process, as well as discuss some potential next steps the council might direct staff to take in the future. Currently, the appeal process includes a hierarchy type of design that allows for the decision-making process to be passed down to the lower levels depending on the level of complexity of the project or the more minor projects. And this allows for a streamlining of the process itself, and it is basically a rule of thumb amongst all jurisdictions. It allows for more flexibility to allow the higher levels to continue in their decision-making process while not relinquishing your overall control of the decisions that are made, so that if you do have an issue with an item, you may call it up at your pleasure. The appeal process does require the application for an appeal be applied for within 14 days, and it can be done by any interested party, which include a neighbor, an applicant, planning commission, or city council. There is a filing fee that's required of all applicants with the exception of planning commission and council, and this is by design as well, in that it does respect the hierarchy process, in that we wouldn't want to penalize a decision maker if you wanted to bring an item up. So that is why the fee for the planning commission or the council is basically waived. And this is also common of all jurisdictions that we surveyed. The appeal fee is provided here showing the past 6 years, and it has been increased, and the most significant increase happened in 2008 as a result of the cost of service study that was done at that point. And at that time, a 50% recovery was determined to be applied. However, that did result in an overall fee that was phased over a 3-year period, which has resulted in today's fee to be about $4,000. It has.
Excuse me, so at $4,000, does that mean the total cost was really $8,000 and we're only charging $4,000?
That is correct.
Okay.
In surveying the 12 jurisdictions that we looked at, the fees do range about $250 to $2,500. And it does vary depending on jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Sometimes it do provide some cost savings for single-family homes, and sometimes it do provide an increased cost to applicants versus the appellants themselves. One thing to note is tonight you do have on your agenda, number item 23, an adjustment to the current master fee schedule. It does include an adjustment to the appeal fee, which would increase it to a little over 3%.
Across the board? Or?
I'm not familiar with the other fees, but the appeal fees themselves would be increased by 3%. So for 2012, the appeal fee for the Planning Commission would be increased to $44.66, and council would be $41.87. So potential next steps, based on the information you've heard tonight, could be possibly to reconsider the appeal fee, to adjust the master fee schedule to recognize the fee waiver for the Planning Commission and City Council, or lastly, to consider an appeal of the amendment to the appeal process in general. With that, that concludes my presentation, and feel free to ask any questions.
Okay, thank you. I'm the one that requested this, and because I did have some concern, it seemed to me like that this was happening more frequently than it has in the past, and the data does seem to bear that out, at least over the last couple of years. And it's just a concern that I have about if we get into too much of a habit of this, it sort of subverts the idea of charging a fee to start with, and there is a small revenue impact on the city. That's really not the big issue, but the other thing is that it lends an opportunity for people to conclude that there was some sort of favoritism on the situation. And so it just seemed to me it was worthwhile for us to have another look at this and make sure that what we're doing is what we think we should be, or make some changes. So with that, I'll open it up to other council members. Mayor Pro Tem Gardner.
I was struck when we were listening to the appeal on the project up on MacArthur, the recent one. I don't remember what the name of it is, but it was pretty...
Shelf Striker, that's why you don't remember it.
The Ridgeway project?
Yes, the Ridgeway project. And he was saying how, well, it was justified to have a councilman bring it up because the fee was so high. And I mean, part of me was going, well, it's not high, it's nothing when you're doing a project of that magnitude to spend $4,000 or $5,000. But it does seem to me that for the average resident, man, you've got to really be feeling you're right to do that. And I know we don't want to have it too cheap because we don't want people just going, well, I don't like the color they're going to paint their door, so I'm going to appeal it. But we also, I think part of the fairness is giving people an opportunity, if they really do feel that there's an issue, to bring it forward without, I just think maybe our fees are a little bit high and we should look at that, particularly when I look at them compared to other jurisdictions. I can't believe we spend that much more staff time than they do, so they're also swallowing some costs probably. So that's something I would like us to look at.
So your comment would have to do then with perhaps making a distinguishing between residential and non-residential projects.
I think that would help, and I know you have some ideas as far as just the Planning Commission and Council appeals, which I think is marriage. Look at that in a way that I share your concern, because I got an email or two saying, well, I wouldn't get that. Only someone who's well-connected can get the councilman or the planning commissioner to appeal it, and that's not the message we want to send. We want people to know that it's a fair playing field for everyone.
Well, I would disagree with that. I have people call me all the time. I think I've appealed a few for people that either have been called me by the right people, and then others that have just called me on their own. And I typically give everybody the same
No, I'm not talking
consideration.
about reality. I'm talking about perception.
Well, they may perceive that they're
And I think a lot of
not
people don't
approachable.
know.
Okay, well,
I mean, they said, I didn't know that I could ask somebody, like a council person, to appeal it. You know, the
well,
average-
maybe the procedure should be better laid out for the customer or whatever. My comment would be that I do think the fees are too high. And a couple of times I've felt like, gee, I felt like telling the person, why don't you just appeal it if you really want to, but when I kind of weighed it with, paying over $4,000, it just didn't seem fair. And I find that frequently these things are if it gets to the point where it's appealed to the city council, frequently it's being overturned or something's being changed. Now, in the case of the Ridgeway project, Todd kind of changed his project and then brought it to us, didn't go back to the planning commission. But there's a lot of folks that just come straight to us, from a planning commission denial or whatever, and it's changed, and it's kind of not fair to, that they had to pay that much money. So I would be supportive of maybe moving our fees more in line with the fees that we saw from some of the other cities, or maybe pursuing this commercial residential distinction, but I do think that our fees are a little bit on the high side. I guess I'm not real certain, and I know that there was a study done or studies done in the past as to how much staff time goes into these appeals and things like that, but I guess in my own layman's feeling, it doesn't look like staff needs to put in that much more time, or maybe they're spending too much time on these appeals when it's really just something that's coming up. It should be the same information, I would think, that we're getting at our level, unless it is something like a Ridgeway project where it's kind of scaling it back or changing the components and then bringing it to us for an appeal. So,
Councilmember Curry?
Well, it would appear that staff is also of the opinion that maybe the fee is just miscalculated, because on page 3 of the staff report, it references the fact that the past appeals, that the rate is based on an assumption of 50 to 53 hours with a 50% cost recovery rate at the rate of 162. But in actuality, the appeals have taken less time. Was that true of appeals prior to this year also? Did they also take less time? Do we know that?
That's
Before
correct.
you got here.
In talking to staff that's been here for quite some time, that is an overestimate of hours of what it takes to develop an appeal report.
Well, then it would appear that the issue that we confront is that our fee recovery study in 2008 was either flawed or staff has become substantially more efficient since 2008
Let's
in how
hope
they
for the
process these. So I think that certainly merits the fact that the fee itself ought to be looked at and recalculated based on the actual time that people spend on these things. I don't have, frankly, a lot of issues with the nature of what's been appealed and how it's been done, but I certainly think the fee is, by the evidence presented here, is no longer appropriate for the service provided.
Councilmember Selich?
Well, I wouldn't have any problem lowering the fee. I've always thought it was a little on the high side, and actually seeing the numbers that we have here kind of confirms that. I really don't see the process being abused. We really don't. And when you take a look at the number of applications we have going through, there really aren't that many appeals, and even if you take the council appeals, there's 12 over, 4 or 5 years, so it's like 3 per year, something like that. So I don't think there's, too many appeals going on. And I think Councilmember Rosansky's right that it isn't a secret that council members or planning commissioners will appeal items up for people. In fact, most of the times, people that are aggrieved in those situations are involved enough in the process that they know that that's an option to them. And I know that I haven't done that many appeals. In fact, I don't think when I was on the planning commission I did any appeals, and since I've been on the council I only did 2, and they happened within 30 days of each other. So they were 2 very, very quick ones. But on the one on 333 Bayside, there was so much community involvement going on between the applicant and the and the residents that it became clear that no matter what the planning commission decision was, that either side wanted me to appeal the decision up to the city council, and that's where it was going to end up. And many times, that's the kind of case you have going on. So I don't really see there's anything wrong with the process that we have right now, but I would be in favor of, making an adjustment to the fee. And I don't see any reason to differentiate between commercial and residential projects. I think we just have one appeal fee. Leave it at that.
Well, with regard to the fee itself, I would be in favor of a reduction as well, and it seems like there's basis to calculate a reduced fee. Depending on where that came out, I might be less inclined to draw a distinction between residential and non-residential. After all, the value of residential real estate in Newport Beach is often pretty darn high, too, so it would be okay with me if the fee calculation came down. On the issue of the process itself, though, I do want to pose for my colleagues' consideration at least one change that I think might add more, appearance of objectivity, if you will. I have a concern that, well, I'll just say for myself, I've turned residents down. I've turned constituents down on doing a no-fee appeal. And I try to distinguish when I get a request like that, is it an agenda item that involves a policy issue that council really ought to be having a look at or sorting out? Or was it, like you noted, a very close vote on an issue that's of real contentiousness to a large number of people, where it ought to rise to council consideration? I do try to draw those distinctions, and I do turn people down on these no-fee appeals on that basis where I can't find the right justification. I would suggest one further change, and that is for these appeals to go forward on a no-fee basis, that it takes two to support the appeal, either at the Planning Commission or at council, that two council members or two Planning Commission members would need to agree that it should be appealed on a no-fee basis. That's sort of, that addresses to some extent, I think, the perception, and that if two council members or two Planning Commission members think there's an issue there that's worth illuminating at that level, it makes it more of a, it seems to me, it justifies it better. So what do you think about making that change in addition to considering a lower fee? I guess I didn't see your light on. Councilmember Hill, would you like to comment?
Well, yes, I would. I guess coming back to Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Gardner's comments, to me, the call-up issue is not whether or not individuals connected, it's whether or not the project has merit, whether or not there's a unique need to deal with that project. And I do disagree. I mean, I think $4,000 can be a hit to some of these projects because this is front-end money, and the most painful money you often spend is the front-end money on a project. And I think that possibly even a bigger issue is the timing. If you've got a project, you're ready to go, you're trying to get your financing, you're trying to move forward, and all of a sudden you hit this roadblock, it can throw you 6 months off to go back through the process and get rescheduled again and those types of things. So I think that timing is an issue as well. I also believe, having said that, though, that one of the most important elements of the fee is to create a screening issue, if you will, so that people aren't willy-nilly calling projects up. And I think that we could meet that screening element by having a lower fee. And so I would support lowering the fee as long as it was still considered to be something that would make someone very serious about calling something up. I would not support a difference between residential and commercial. And I would support having the requirement of two council people to proceed with a call-up.
Or two Planning Commissioners.
Two planning commissioners.
The appellate body.
Do we still have a, oh, that's right, we still
Yeah.
do.
Councilmember Daigle.
I would support the two-person, and as a matter of fact, it used to be three, so over the years, we've sort of wavered between one and something else. And I know in the case of the Pizzeria Mazza, there was clear policy direction by the council. It was adopted in, our major document, our general plan, and yet someone felt that their view ought to be heard. I found that to be an example of bad government that we need to avoid in the future because the applicant was set back, 4 to 6 weeks to hear it. So I'd like to see the two-person rule, which I think is a good middle ground between the 1 and the 3. And that would be my thoughts at this stage.
Councilmember Selich?
Well, I just don't see what two persons is going to do. I mean, quite frankly, it's, any council member is going to be able to most likely find another council member to support him in an appeal. And if one of your fellow council members come to you asking you to support him in an appeal, you're probably going to be hard-pressed to say no. So I think it's maybe more of a show statement than actually doing anything.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I seem to recall we went to the 3, and actually, I thought it was 4. I don't think it was.
That'd be a decision.
I recall talking against that because I thought it was a Brown Act, or we require a Brown Act violation. But I agree with Ed. I mean, unless you're going to get a council member that's just totally on the outs like we've had in the past, since I've been on city council, we've had 1 or 2 of those. I think it's going to be pretty easy to find another one, so it's really just window dressing as opposed to...
Well, actually, you have to be pretty careful who you ask because you get 2 turndowns and you're out.
Yeah, you could. That's true. I guess you have to be pretty confident in your choice. But, I'd prefer to just see how it goes with the lower fee and try it with that. See if that's enough to screen out the frivolous appeals, but low enough so that you don't feel like, geez, I got to really call this up because I don't want to make this guy, pay $4,500 or whatever the number was, $4,700.
Well, we got a little dance going here. We got 3 for 2 and 2 for 1. So what do we
I may
say?
be on the fence on that one. I've heard some pretty persuasive arguments.
Okay.
Well, I think that the one thing that the 2 does is, I agree that it's not going to probably be that hard to get it. But I do think it also goes to that, a little bit towards the idea of the perception that you're in with somebody. This way you've got to be in with 2 people. I mean, somebody has to persuade someone else. So I could certainly support going for the 2.
Well, okay, staff needs direction. So at this juncture, what's the consensus here?
Lower fee.
Lower fee, everybody's okay on that, and we'll throw it back to staff to come back with a recommendation on that.
Well, actually, Ed, we can go through the exercise of counting the hours and proposing something, but you guys may just go ahead and pick the fee that you want. Do you have a fee in mind that you think is appropriate when you look at this?
My number was
Ballpark?
$2,500.
That was my number.
Yeah, it's kind of my number 2, but I'd still rather...
We can do that,
I'd really rather hear what
it helps
is.
us
I'd rather have
land.
justification for it than just picking a number out of the hat. And we can always say, well, we only want 75% recovery or whatever, even if it is...
This helps us know what hat to pick from. If
Yeah,
we,
well,
know
$2,500
it.
seems like a decent deal. But as
If
far
your
as...
calculation came out there, that would be fine.
Yeah. And then I'm for the 1 person call-up.
So, all right,
I'm going to stick with 1.
1, you're a 1, you're a 1. Okay.
That's a 1.
I see.
That's a 1 and a pencil.
4 to 3
I
on
counted
the
4
1.
to keep it the way it is,
Yeah, I
for
do
a
too.
single person to make the appeal.
I'd say at least try it that way
At both
with
the
the
planning
lower-
commission and the
Right.
council level.
And we had one other question come up, whether there should be a different fee for a residential project versus a commercial project.
Same fee.
I think if the fee is in the $2,500 range, I think it's within the means of virtually anybody who's going to come.
Okay? Then, okay, heads nodding. Staff, you feel like you have direction? Kim?
We do. If I could just make one more observation. This evening on your regular agenda, you will be looking at the entire master fee schedule. As Brenda indicated in her presentation, that the appeal fees that we currently have in place will be adjusted by the CPI, and that there is under consideration, though, some new fees, which does include a new appeal fee, which is an appeal fee of the city manager's approval or non-approval of a special event to the city council. The recommendation for that fee, as opposed to being a full recovery fee is to be 25%, which I don't have the number in front of me, but I think it's about $1,500. The appeal fees that are currently in place in the fee schedule for both the appeals, for 3 items, the appeals board, which is the fire and building safety appeals board, and then the planning commission fees and the city council fees are based on a 50% recovery. So if the council were interested in having consistency in the assumption in terms of the amount of recovery, you could consider at this evening's adoption of the master fee schedule of a 25% recovery fee for all appeal fees, and then at least you would have a consistent assumption. So something more for you to think about. But I think it also brings it in the range. It would be 50% of the fee, so it's about $4,500, so that's about $2,250, somewhere in that range. I'm not an engineer, I'm a planner, so my math sometimes is off.
Kim, I was noticing in that fee schedule that the Board of Building Appeals fee was pretty stiff. I think it was like $6,500, something like that.
It is extremely high.
How many of those do we have a year?
We have only had one to date, and to my knowledge, but the labor assumptions that went into that establishment of the fee back in 2008 were what they were, and again, it was a 50% recovery. It's something that when our department's reviewed again, I would like to look at those numbers. But again, as Dave was mentioning, what fee is it that you have in mind? I think the 25% based on our current labor assumptions is in the ballpark in comparison to surrounding jurisdictions.
Anything else?
Well, just following up on our comment, or we can talk about it later tonight, I think there is a distinction of the 25% recovery on special events because typically they're special events and people that are coming forward are charities or organizations that are putting on things in town. And so I don't know that I'd want to even those up. I'd rather just hear what the number is and then make a decision if we just want to change it. Okay? I mean, that's my opinion.
Well, we'll have another crack at that tonight if we want to discuss it further. Is that enough guidance?
With public comment, it might be.
Is there public comment on this agenda item?
Yes, Mayor Hennon, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. I applaud your effort to lower these fees. I do think that they're too high, particularly the one that the director just and Councilman Solich mentioned about the Fire Board of Appeals, $6,500. Doesn't sound reasonable in terms of what we've just heard. As to the call-up procedure and the public's perception of that, I do have multiple problems with individual council members calling up matters for appeal. The fundamental problem I see is that our charter vests the power of the city in you, a body of 7 elected officials, acting collectively by majority vote or higher. And to the best of my knowledge, other than the stipend that you have the right to receive for your service, you're not given any special rights or privileges different than any other citizen of the city. So you may be interested parties in these matters, but you really don't have a different standing that I know of under the city charter. As an example, if you were remodeling your own home, you can't go to the planning division and wave some card saying, I'm on the city council, I don't have to pay any fees. Likewise, you haven't been empowered with a right to waive fees for your neighbors or friends. So there is that problem of the perception. So I certainly favor the direction Mayor Hanna is going in, but I would go even beyond that. As he said, I can certainly envision situations in which you wish to call up a matter on appeal because it's a matter of wide public interest. But I think in those special circumstances, the decision has to be a collective one made by you. So the single council person who is approached should bring the matter to you as a collective council, and you should make the decision whether it's a worthy thing to be appealed. It doesn't have to be a big decision. You're just deciding, kind of like the Supreme Court does when they have a case. Should we hear the case or not? You should be collectively deciding, which would take 4 votes then to decide, do you want to hear the appeal or not? That's what I think would be a fair and equitable procedure. Thank you.
Is there any other comment on this item?
Good afternoon. My name is George Schroeder, and I'm a 25-year resident. I basically support the direction you're going. I think the fees are way too high, and I do think that if you do analyze the cost, if you analyze the cost of a commercial project versus the cost of a residential project, the single-family homes, I'm sure they cost about half of what the average commercial project costs. So if you are using that logic, I think there's a good case to be made that a single-family home project or a residential project should be charged a lesser fee. I guess that's about all I have to add. Thank you, and yes, the fees are too high.
Any other comment? Seeing none, I think we're done with this item. Can we move on then to the economic development update?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. This next presentation is one that I think a number of council members have been waiting for and asked for, involving our updated review of our economic development function, and Dana Smith, the Assistant City Manager, will lead the presentation.
Thank you, Dave. In early 2000, under some budget constraints and actually a request by the city manager to take a look at how our economic development division was functioning, we disbanded that division and embarked upon an activity to rethink economic development as it might relate to specifically to the city of Newport Beach. We hired a consultant, Cindy Nelson, who has long, deep experience in running economic development programs for the city of Santa Ana to help guide our thinking in this. We came up with a sort of a three-pronged approach, some of which is well underway, which started with your council's workshop in February of 2011. And I'm just going to iterate them really quickly. The first was improve our infrastructure and invest in the maintenance and infrastructure in the city that will encourage private investment. This particular goal of investing in infrastructure is one that cities primarily do vis-a-vis redevelopment agencies. You'll see redevelopment agencies and economic development closely tied because the most powerful thing a city can do to enhance investment by the private sector is to create a city that has a strong infrastructure and strong tools for private investment. The second area I want to focus on is improved permitting and customer service in our development services departments, which we spent some time talking about already this year. And the third is enhanced business relationships, including, I'll spend a little bit more time talking about our business improvement districts and sort of some goals to help those bids work a little bit more effectively. I do want to comment that when we disbanded the Economic Development Division in 2011, we functionally moved contact for our business community and activities into the city manager's office. Many cities locate economic development either with redevelopment or in the city manager's office for the purpose of elevating it to a level that major employers, major economic sectors have direct access to both the city manager's office as well as the council in a little bit more direct way. You're going to see mostly pictures up there on the slide, no words. The revitalization goals that you established in early 2007, I'm not going to go into the 5 projects that we currently have underway, other than to say that we went from spending approximately $300,000 for our economic development division to support primarily small business processing, and we've turned that into this year about an $800,000 investment in much-needed projects in our neighborhoods and communities focused on commercial areas. I think we have one core project that you identified that we've not undertaken, and that's the revitalization of Mariners Mile. That will be a significant project. It could have a tremendous impact on the city. And we foundationally have started looking, or at least preparing some of the foundational information for Mariners Mile revitalization effort through a regional economic study that's looking at the entire peninsula and West Newport as an integrated set of systems. Part of our, this is the first part of our economic strategy, is to continue to provide city dollars for both capital improvements in communities as well as maintenance of our communities. I will comment, And speaking with others about economic development, there's a common theme when people drive into Newport Beach, and that is, you know you're there when you're there. And other cities would love to have that effect of having its infrastructure well cared for, its streets maintained, its medians in a pristine state. And those kinds of physical environments provide the setting for businesses to want to locate here and bring their workforce here. The second component of a strong economic development program, I think we're well underway on, and that is to look at our own internal processes, our development and customer service processes, which we've been focused on for the last year and a half. We have substantially, and I'm not going to go into this, but we've substantially revamped, particularly in the building division side, the way we process permits for new businesses. And continue to provide improvements and assistance to the community. Kim's group has dedicated staff now within community development to help the small businesses, the mom and pops that come in and say, I have no idea what I need or how to get my permit processed for whatever that might be, my hair salon, my restaurant. And Kim has a particular I guess, soft spot, I would say, for those small businesses, and is committed to providing that resource inside the Community Development Department. We also, not to focus too much on community development, I do want to acknowledge the award that Kim's department just received from the Orange County Business Council, turning red tape into red carpet, and a lot of that was based on those improvements in the department. The other business improvement program I'd like to suggest for this next year, and it's one that I think I committed to the Economic Development Committee before we disbanded that, was to take a look wholesale at our business license process from beginning to end. Take a look at it in terms of best practices, in terms of its ease and clarity for the business community. I would like that process to report to the Finance Committee, because business licenses do generate about, I want to say, Tracy, $3 million. Where did Tracy go? She left me all alone up here. I think it's about $3 million in revenue to cities, not an unsubstantial amount of money. So that business license review is something I would recommend that we start in this next year, along with continuing to look at permit streamlining and really focus on customer service. All right, the third prong of our strategy is to enhance our relationships with our business sector. The first part of this is developing, I think, a stronger, better rapport from the manager's office, from the council offices, with our major business sectors. Lots of cities do it different ways, and we can do it the Newport way. But my suggestion is that we have strong tourism, hotels, restaurant sector, real estate, Hoag Hospital is a major employer, and the report sort of suggests some ideas to create a formal way to build rapport and relationships. And we've started that out of the manager's office at Dave's direction. We met with the COO of Hoag Hospital, and it was a great meeting. They said, gosh, we should do this more often because there are things we could, and there are projects that we could begin to work on together. And out of that one-hour meeting, we came up with a list of 3 or 4 initiatives that they would be very grateful for, and some things that we would be very grateful for. We've met with some of our major sales tax providers, and they were grateful to the opportunity to have more contact. And what they asked for was the ability to have access to our police chief, perhaps our public works director, or others when issues come up. And it's very easy to arrange that when you're in the manager's office. So that's one of our core goals. I think the report talks about, maybe setting up a mayor's biannual breakfast or lunch, or a way for the business sectors to feel connected to the city, and that's completely at your discretion. We sort of put those out there for ideas. Support for small businesses. This is probably the section that we work the hardest on, trying to think about how how to really work with our business improvement districts in a way that they're going to feel supported and not burdened by some of the government regulations. So in thinking about the problems that the bids, and I think all of you have had some conversations with the bids, are experiencing, I'll just tick them off. Difficult, and let me start by saying a bid under the 1989 Act is considered a subdivision of the city, and as such, they are required to follow Brown Act. They are required to post meetings for their agendas, take minutes. They should be abiding by conflict of interest rules. And I think most burdensome to the bids is this idea of following our own contracting rules. Because many times they use very, very small vendors. They're on the fly. They want to make decisions. And they have found it extremely, extremely frustrating to try to abide by city rules. What we're proposing in this strategy is to create a bid administrator for the four bids, one administrator, one contract with the city. We would work with the bids themselves, perhaps one representative from the bid to help us develop the criteria, but that bid administrator would assist them with their agendas, their noticing, their managing their subcontractors. I know some of them have accountants that keep track of their books, managing all of their other ancillary contracts that the bids require or need them to do to get their work done. What this does is it means there's one contract with the city, and that contract has to be put out to bid, follow all of the city's bidding requirements. They would report to us, but work for the bids. If they worked for all of the bids, they'd be able to consolidate their efforts. For example, web design, hopefully marketing materials could be standardized. There's a number of economies of scale that the bids themselves would benefit from this kind of a program. And our overall goal was to relieve the burden on the bids, to make them a little bit freer to carry on the work that's important in the communities. We don't have budget numbers for this yet. I'm trying to get a sense of where you think we're on the right path in the way that we're approaching economic development. If we are, particularly around how we want to work with the bids, then we'll go put a small committee together. We'll come back with some numbers. We'll probably put some criteria together for a proposal and come back and get your final blessing on the dollar amounts. Actually, that's really all I have for you today. I want to just reiterate there's really three approaches, and we're already doing two of them. So the third one is whether this supporting the bids through this type of bid administrator speaks to you. I didn't mention, but I did in the report, that we would be looking to work with the chambers on educational opportunities to support small businesses and those kinds of things. But I think the biggest focus is on getting this issue with our bids straightened out.
Okay. Councilmember Hill.
Well, I obviously think that the city's focus on economic development is an extremely important activity. And I realize that when we disband our economic development staff, that we committed at that time that we would take a relook and attempt to define what was most efficient and effective in supporting the economic vitality of the community. I think your report touches on the appropriate things. I think that obviously revitalization of our non-performing areas in the city is an obvious, almost one could say quick win or obvious win opportunity. I think that's an important part of the puzzle. I think that all the way back to the early 90s when we started forming bids, I think that that's something that we have not exercised to the extent that it could be exercised. Some of the bids are much more active than others and much more aggressive, and I think some strong leadership in that area is very important. So I support very much looking at trying to centralize that. I think that's a perfect thing to outsource. to have a bid consultant, if you will, that helps them establish annual goals, helps them take them through the planning process, becomes a facilitator, business consultant to them to help them organize and move forward. I guess in a global sense, I would like to see the attention that we pay to helping small business start in this community, filling our office space, filling our retail space, that we deal with that with the same integrity and velocity that we dealing with tourism and filling our hotel rooms and our restaurants and keeping people in our stores. The same success that the Visitors and Conference Bureau or Visit Newport Beach has in focusing on tourism and visitors to our city, I think should be dealt with in focusing with people that work here, that create jobs here through the business activity. And so anything that we do in that direction, I'm a cheerleader for the staff on.
Okay, Councilmember Daigle?
Yes, on the Orange County Business Council Award, first of all, congratulations. That's really fantastic. And I was wondering, do you have any insights or stories that might illuminate further, why you felt the City of Newport Beach got that award and what you've been doing in those departments and where you see it going?
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased that we did receive the award, and I think it's a reflection of the entire department's attitude towards customer service and providing it at an excellent level. We have very qualified staff in terms of in the building division as it relates to plan check engineers, and we really kind of turned the tables and said, let's see what we can do over the counter. What can we do while we have the architect or the engineer here at City Hall? Let's bring our engineers down to the counter and let's talk about what's being proposed. Let's see where the questions are. Let's bring out the folks from Public Works that might be affected, the folks from fire prevention, and let's see if we can get this resolved with all the parties right here. And so the thought is that looking at the type of permits that we do on a day-to-day basis, that we could do approximately 80% of our plan reviews over the counter. So that was the goal that was set for the department, and what we found in practicing it since the beginning of September, that's a very realistic goal, and that people are pleased. And first of all, it's very unexpected. Like, you mean we can take care of this now, and I can walk out the door with the permit? So that, I think, is a great story, and it just highlights the attitude of the department and the willingness of all our staff just to get it done. So.
Okay. And then my other question was with the bids. I mean, we have thousands of businesses in our community. Within the bids, how many businesses are there, let's say, in the Balboa Island bid, and what's really the return on investment to continue to push resources into a bid? I mean, what are we getting in return for that?
Well, I can certainly answer in Corona Del Mar what we get. I mean, we've had all that median work and everything,
Right.
the beautification, that was done with a lot of bid dollars, not just city dollars. So they certainly have
What be
invested
interested
in the community.
in, for example, Balboa Island, what's been the return on the investment?
I would have
Well, I
no
can
way
speak
of,
to
no
that
way
one.
of telling you that, maybe.
Yeah, I can speak to that when I go to all their meetings every month, and they're a much smaller bid than Corona Del Mar, and they don't have the same financial resources, and they don't have the same aggressive program on physical improvements, but they focus their efforts on marketing. The advertisements in different publications, different events. For example, they had right before Halloween, they had a jazz festival where they closed down Marine Avenue, and it's all intended to help promote the businesses and create a more vibrant business environment for all the businesses on Marine Avenue. So they're very active.
Okay.
They're not as big as Corona Del Mar, but they certainly have as much passion.
Okay. So what about the many thousands of businesses that are not in a bid? What are we doing for them?
We're fixing the medians, cleaning the roads.
Right.
We're doing those street signalization, right, Steve? Street. I mean, those are all the things. And remember, bids assess themselves. So they're about marketing their own businesses in their community. That's a big part of it.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Councilmember Curry?
Well, first of all, I think we've got some excellent bids in the city of Newport Beach. They're all different, they all do different things, and they all work in a little bit different way because of the nature of their constituency. It's important to note that bids are voluntary groups of businesses who band together and assess themselves for purposes of advancing the common good. So I think they do a great job in those areas of the city where they have them. It's important to note that bids, though, are in fact collections of residents and neighbors who band, businesses who band together to work together. And so I suppose and they're only really effective as the involvement of the number of people in the bid who get involved and stay active. So I guess as it relates to having a sort of a centralized bid administrator, the first question I'd ask, is that something that the people who are active in the bids have asked for, or is that a solution in search of a problem?
Well, can I
Sure.
contribute to that? Because I know I am liaison with two bids, the Restaurant Association and Corona Del Mar. And what I've noticed, there is at least one bid member that shares, he's on both bids. And he has tried at times to create more synergy, because there are all sorts of opportunities, say, between the Restaurant Association and the others. And it's hard because you're working with three different groups, and then everybody's working at the same time with other jobs rather than just focusing on the bid. So a lot of times things don't get carried along as much as they might if there were that one person. And the other part of it is I think that we have been talking about trying to create a Newport look in terms of making the city website, for example, that we don't have a bunch of different websites when you go on. We have one city website, one look. And this would be an opportunity to be sure that they all have that same good Newport cachet in their marketing efforts and their web pages and that sort of thing. So I think to me, it seems like a real opportunity to make them even more effective.
Well, what it also does is it helps the small bids like Marine Avenue to have greater resources. The one thing here we've been talking about is centralizing or coordinating the development of the websites, and it's difficult for a small group like that, where if there was a central administrator and a central type of operation going on, they could have a much more robust website going for themselves. So I think there's benefits like that can be achieved through this.
Councilmember Hill?
When the city made the decision to disband its economic development staff, the first individuals to come running and screaming were the bids. And, who's going to help us, who's going to help coordinate us, and how are we going to continue to survive? And so one of the commitments that we made to the bids at that point in time was that as we pursued identifying what the economic development model looked like for the city, that it would keep the bids in strong format of that. So I think the answer to your question is they're very supportive of that. They're looking forward to it.
Councilmember Daigle?
Yeah, I think my point is, though, there's a lot of other businesses out there, too, that would appreciate website assistance as well. So I think we have to look at casting a wider net versus, okay, we're just going to target these bids and look at other businesses that we can help as well.
I think the thing that, I agree with you. I think that that's advantageous. I don't want to cram it down anybody's throat, however, because as Councilman Curry eloquently stated, bids are organizations that came together and asked for permission to become an organized entity to be able to self-tax and self-govern the expense of those funds. And that's kind of like a lighting district or anything else. It's based upon a majority vote. So we do have individuals that are members of multiple bids, because if Corona Del Mar Business District has a bid, if the Restaurant Association has a bid, and you have a restaurant in that district, you're on those two bids. Clearly, there are businesses that are outside of all of those circles, and to the extent that they want to get on a bandwagon and organize, they have that right as well.
So, as far as I'm concerned, I'm in favor of what's being proposed here. I think as a matter of overarching strategy for the city, it's important that we do a better job of integrating and supporting all of the various parts of the city that are out there messaging to either consumers or residents or visitors or whatever. We have a whole array of entities here, and anything that we can do to move in the direction of a better integrated, strategic approach to how we interface the city, market the city, however you want to say it, it's a step forward, in my view, and one that we need to keep going down the path of. You know, as it relates to the bids themselves, these are essentially volunteer organizations. They're taxing themselves and then trying to spend money. There is this issue of continuity of, you know, you'll go along for a while and there'll be a couple of three really strong individuals who've got a lot of tenacity and energy to put at it, and then they become interested in something else or move along, and then things go into a lull. I mean, there's just this cycle like that occurs in essentially volunteer organizations, and I think it would be very helpful to have professional continuity beneath that keeps things moving in the right direction. The last thought that I would add is, I think the bids, we need to rationalize how the bids are funded. I don't, it seems like it's sort of the way it is because that's the way it has always been, or it's kind of developed along the way. I'd like to find a way to rationalize the funding of the bids, and perhaps along the way increase the funding to the bids so that they can do more to help and benefit the particular areas they serve, especially in those circumstances where there are funding sources associated with those areas. And the case in point here for that is Balboa Village, for example, where there are tremendous parking revenues generated down there. And it seems to me there can be a good case made for an increased share of those revenues being devoted to the area and perhaps being made available to the businesses that directly benefit and in effect help pay the load, you know, for that area. So I'd like to see that as a component as well that's examined and come back with recommendations. Is there anything else here that's... All right, so let's hear from the public on this point. Thank you, Dana. Anyone wish to make a comment?
Good afternoon, council members. Scott Palmer. I'm your kind of boots-on-the-ground guy for the business improvement districts, at least for the past 13 years. Councilman Daigle, there's about 1,000 businesses that are within the city business improvement districts that are assessed. I can give you the breakdown if you want. Doesn't really matter. The issue is that many of our businesses in the cities are covered by other types of CAM charges or communal marketing charges. If you're in an Irvine company development, you are paying into essentially the bid that the Irvine company has established. So personally, I think the continuity for the bids, having a little bit more vocalization, a little bit more representation for the bids would be a very good thing. Some of the things that I would ask that when you're developing this, we really take a look at the liability limits and perhaps really get the risk manager of the city involved in what kind of insurance load this bid manager would have to carry, and that would have to be factored into the formula for asking for the RFP. The other thing, too, is at the beginning, how do we really bring the city into the bid manager? What kind of liaisons are established? They're going to have very strong ties with the CCD, with the Public Works Department, with the General Services Department to know how to really bring forward the bids agenda and process it through the city. And then, you know, really how far does the managerial authority of the bid manager go? I mean, obviously, we're looking at kind of moving away from the F14, F5 purchasing requirements and giving those to the bid, but what kind of reporting, what kind of feedback needs to come back to the city from the bid manager? So, you know, I'd be pleased to be involved in any kind of development that the staff does on this, but those are three of the major points that I saw in developing the program that probably should be really addressed to make sure that the bid manager knows what he's getting into. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Scott. Other comments?
Mayor Hannon, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. I'm confused about a couple of points. First, about the talk about a bid administrator. I thought Scott here is the bid administrator, and we're paying him $38,000 a year of taxpayer money, not bid levies to perform most of the functions that are described in the report here, including attending all the meetings and watching over their finances. So I'm a little confused about that. I'm also a little confused about the statement. I appreciate the thought, and I wish the bids were entirely voluntary, but my understanding is they can be formed by a petition of a very small number of business owners. Once formed, it takes a majority vote to disband the bid, but I don't think it was created necessarily by a majority of them. And then speaking to both Councilman Curry and Councilman Daigle's point, as Councilman Curry said, the concept of the bid is that they're supposed to be self-funding through their levies. And as Councilman Daigle pointed out, they represent only a small part of the businesses in the city of Newport Beach. To the extent that they're self-funded, I don't have any particular problem with them. But to the extent that we're plowing taxpayer money from you, me, and all the rest of us into the bids, that's a case of favoritism that I don't think is quite proper. As an analogy, if you decided as a council you wanted to give a gift of $50,000 to the merchants in the Bison Shopping Center or Westcliff or on Mariners Mile, none of whom are in a bid, people would think that's something wrong about that. You're making a gift of public funds to a private group to do whatever they want to do with it. And so I have a problem with plowing taxpayer money into the bids as individual groups. That's, I guess, is my main comment on that. Thank you.
Other comments?
Mayor, council members, Denise Oberman. First, I wanted to commend the staff for making the direction of having an integrated regional study relative to Mariners Mile, Peninsula, Lido, that side of the coast, other than Balboa Island and Corona del Mar. It does represent an area that is substantially under-leveraged for the city, and it's also a very challenging one in every area that the staff is proposing to address in its strategy. I think in addition, I'd like to know a little bit more about the study, and maybe staff offline could advise me of that. I'm most interested in that. I think it is very important for our city. We've got a tremendous potential for an economic base. We have net a very high per capita with the residential component. And from the commercial standpoint, I think we're still floundering as a city in trying to figure out what should the scheme be, and that's for this broader area. And I think, in fact, it needs, by definition, to be a broader area. So that direction is absolutely the right one to go. I think one thing could be added, along with the outreach and the idea of having the city manager's office being able to help with private development and private enterprise is a good one. Perhaps there could be a more concerted outreach to significant private developers with some of the potential anchor uses that could drive that economy, hospitality uses, maybe some other broader mixed use or commercial use development, to get some ideas and maybe even go so far as to get some RFPs, concepts out of the private sector as to what to do with this area. There are a lot of challenges, infrastructure challenges, rights challenges, understanding the demographic that would, the resident demographic and also the visitor demographic that would drive the economic success. So I'd say reach out on a global level for some new ideas that could help. So I applaud the council and particularly the staff for what's being done in that area.
Other comments? Okay. Did you get some good direction here? All right. Great. Then let's move on to public comments. We do distribute an agenda that includes a description of the closed session agenda. I'd be happy to accept public comments on the closed session agenda or other items. Does anyone wish to make a comment?
Mayor Hannon, members of the council, my name again is Jim Mosier. I wanted to take a moment to bring to your attention a change in the format of the meetings of the city's many boards, commissions, and committees, which I understand was instituted by the city attorney earlier this month. Especially, I wanted to call your attention to a major change in the opportunity for public comment. which, if one believes the new agenda format, is now being confined to a single segment at the very beginning of each meeting, in which each person wishing to speak is given a single 3-minute statement encompassing anything that might happen at the meeting, whether it's on the agenda or not. This is quite different from the past practice in Newport Beach, whereas at council meetings, the public was invited to comment on each item as it came up, in addition to being given a separate opportunity to comment on non-agenda items. I first encountered this new format at a meeting of the Board of Library Trustees on November 7th, then again 2 days later at the Harbor Commission meeting, and last week at the Tidelands Management Committee. To their credit, the chairs of each of these meetings ignored the new directive and, as in the past, invited comment from the public on each separate agenda item. But at the very least, this bold new announcement implying that the public will not be allowed to speak except in one time creates confusion, and it bogs down the meetings by forcing the public to ask what items they will be allowed to comment on. Although I would like to commend the new city attorney on this effort to standardize the way public meetings are conducted in Newport Beach, at the same time I'd like to remind you that although our city charter invites the city attorney to offer advice on the legality of decisions, it does not give him the power to make those decisions. That is your job, and if you feel that standardization of the agendas for the many meetings that the city holds is a welcome change, then I would suggest you place that on the agenda for one of your own future meetings, where you, as the makers of public policy, can make a decision informed not just by the city attorney's advice, but also by your reaction and that of the public to his advice. I personally would argue that this new proposed change is an unconstitutional abridgment of the public's right to speak. Thank you.
Did you wish to respond, Aaron?
Yeah, just briefly. Mr. Mosher brought to our attention that some of the boards and commissions' agendas were not in compliance with the Brown Act. So our office, to address his concern, basically came up with a form agenda that does comply with the Brown Act. And the Brown Act does provide that having a single comment period for agenda and non-agenda items is in compliance with the Brown Act. Mr. Mosher previously expressed concern after we came out with the form agenda that he thought there should be 2 comment periods. We subsequently came up with a second form agenda that has a comment period for non-agenda items and a separate comment period for agenda items. And we think it's really up to the boards and commissions about how they would like to operate their meetings and which agenda they would prefer to use.
There is nothing, though, to prevent any commission or committee having something on the agenda, the item, and then say, is there public comment on each item if they wish?
That's also acceptable. The Brown Act sets minimum requirements. Each chairman of the board can open up for additional public comment of their choosing.
Okay, Councilman Rosansky.
Well, it's the first I'm hearing about that, and I'll be honest with you, that doesn't seem fair. I would think that people should be able to comment on each agenda item if they wanted to. I don't know why I don't know that the committees have agendas that are so broad that, they're having 3, 4, 5 different items. Usually, I imagine most meetings are probably one item, and it's fine, but I'm in favor of people having an opportunity to speak, and I don't think that they need to cram 3 agenda items into 3 minutes. That wouldn't be fair. So if that is the direction you're taking, then I probably would like to discuss it at council.
Councilmember Daigle?
Well, having dealt with a lot of different public agencies, there's lots of different ways, it seems like, to meet the law, to meet the Brown Act. And so just because the council's doing it one way and the Harbor Commission's doing it the other way doesn't mean that one entity is right and the other is wrong. Isn't there quite a few ways to make it work?
Yeah, and I think our biggest concern was in essence that some of the agendas were arguably not in compliance with the Brown Act. We wanted to come up with form agendas that can be utilized by the boards and commission that does comply with the specific requirements of the Brown Act. But I think for if any board or commission wishes to modify that and have a different process for public comment for their individual board or commission meeting, we'd be happy to modify the agenda for them as well.
Yeah, I think your intent was to set a minimum standard, and we can certainly be expansive beyond that.
That's correct.
Well, again, I would think that the minimum is that everybody gets to comment on each agenda item for 3 minutes. That would be my minimum. we could have that across the board, right? I mean, we wouldn't have to, I understand what you're trying to accomplish, and I agree, they should be uniform, but I don't know why we would go with the very basic least amount of public input as opposed to what I would hope would be robust public input in each agenda item. That would be my opinion on it.
Anyone else?
No, I would agree, and I just took it, Aaron and I had a couple of exchanges on this, and I didn't, after he explained it, it wasn't meant to limit that kind of public comment, it just meant to ensure. But perhaps we need to communicate with the commissions and committees to let them know.
I think we've strayed beyond public comment here with
That's
this
true.
discourse.
Was this
So-
something you'd like to have us place on the agenda for discussion?
I would, I guess, if that's our new policy going forward. Hey, don't I only get one to appeal?
You know, I see a couple of head shaking no. That's
Well,
not
certainly if it's a
necessary.
change in our policy, I mean, we've had a policy all along, is my understanding of it. Dave's not shaking his head, so if there's further-
Actually, I think.
Well, if that's been our practice, I guess, whatever.
Practice,
Okay,
maybe.
practice is a
Policy-
better word.
policy
We
says
had
follow the Brown
We
Act.
didn't have our policy. I assume we've made a policy now, and we had a practice, and if we're going to change the practice, I don't know why it would hurt to talk about it.
I guess the opportunity here is for any council member to request an item be put on an agenda. We usually do that in announcements at the regular meeting. So it appears that Councilmember Rosansky would like to see that as an
Yeah,
agenda
I
item.
would.
And I think probably he's within his right to request that
I mean,
on his own.
clearly, if Mr. Moser's gone to 3 committee meetings, and each one has waived that policy, then there's a problem, okay, and we should talk about it, so.
All right. Councilmember Selledge.
Yeah, in 16 and a half years of being here, I've never been to a meeting where anyone's been denied the opportunity to comment on anything.
I know.
I think it's much ado about nothing, and we've got enough to do without wasting time having this as an agenda item at
Well,
another
I think
council
it's
meeting.
a perception of openness and fairness and a willingness to listen to the public on each agenda item separately. That's my opinion, so.
So I suppose the thing to do is if at council this evening, during announcements, when we typically do this.
If you'd
you wanna
prefer I
request
bring
an
it up then,
agenda
I'll be
item,
more
you
than
can do
happy
that.
to do that. Thank
All
you.
right.
Yes.
All right. I think that is the ordinary procedure.
Okay.
So, okay, are there any other public comments? Seeing none, we'll adjourn to closed session.